Oh my, the best laid plans of mice and men. We're having technical difficulties this morning. We think we have overcome at least some of them now, but there are probably going to be some that we're still dealing with. You know what? We just take it in stride. So, good morning. Listen, we're going to move on with the show here and do the best we can and appreciate your patience if you're joining us live here on Facebook. And yeah, I'll just briefly tell you what happened. We started our regular live stream and realized just about a minute or so in that it wasn't going out to Facebook. And when we tried to launch our Facebook connection, it said, no, you deleted this on Facebook. I said, no, we really didn't. So anyway, we kind of had to start from scratch. And like I said, we're going to do the best we can. Yes, woohoo, we're here. So listen, we're moving ahead, just like we're going to pretend like everything's normal, although we're not. We talk a lot about making a difference on this show. And we're going to be talking to a guest this morning who really epitomizes that. And for the sake of time, I'm going to skip the cold open. And we're just going to kind of go into our opening here. And we're actually going to see if it works. It's kind of working so far. But welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. I'm Steve Glavin. This is the show where we come together around our virtual coffee table each week and join the conversation to chat about interesting topics with amazing guests. If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome. And we're usually more organized than this. And if you've been with us before, welcome back. And you know that we're sometimes at least try to be more organized than this. Oh my goodness. Hey, that's just the way things go sometimes. I'm going to see if our scenes are still set up. I don't think they are, quite frankly, but we're going to give this a shot. And no, they're not. That's all right. We'll fix them. We're going to talk about our sweet and savory before we get on to the other stuff that we want to do today. I just want to see who's here first. Hello, Shalane. Guten Morgen. Jerry Thompson. Buenos dias. Oh, I love all of this. And you did all that in 5 minutes. We did what we needed to do in 5 minutes, Shalane. And, 6 years has taught us that we need to be able to fix things on the fly. And so we did. Yes, Rick is here. Good morning. And Kathy is here. Hi. The charcuterie is up. So let's get on to the charcuterie here because this is a busy couple weeks and we're not actually going to be here next Saturday. We'll talk about that at the end of the show a little bit more. But because of that, we are going to talk about some things that are coming up in the next 2 weeks in our charcuterie, in our sweet and savory. But this evening at sunset, the Jewish holiday Passover begins this evening. So at sunset tonight, the Passover is officially underway. If that's something that you celebrate, happy Passover. And also, Shalane says necessity, invention, mother, etc. There's the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. I contend that mother was the invention of necessity, but that's just me. All right. Also, although it's not coming up this week, next Sunday, a week from tomorrow, is Easter. And I believe this year it actually, Orthodox Easter often falls on a different timeline because of how they recognize the years. But I believe this year Orthodox Easter may also be on the same date, but that's on the 20th of April, which is a week from this Sunday. And so if that's something you celebrate, from my standpoint, the picture you see here is because from my personal beliefs, my focus on Easter is the Christian focus of Jesus' resurrection. For many people, Easter is just a family get together. For some, it's about hiding and hunting for the Easter eggs, which is a little tougher this year for some people if they're using real eggs, because it's actually become a treasure hunt if you're hunting for real eggs right now. But just because of the cost of eggs. But anyway, one way or another, if you celebrate Easter next week, happy Easter. And we have some birthdays coming up. In fact, there's one coming up in a couple of days. Aaron Glavin is celebrating a birthday. The picture you see here is actually from his birthday a couple of years ago, which is why he has that amazing dessert in front of him that's making me hungry. So happy birthday to Aaron. And then coming up on the 19th, which is next Saturday, Isaac Knox, who is a comedian, a freestyle rapper, has been a guest on this show in the past. Isaac is celebrating a birthday. So happy birthday to Isaac. And then we have some birthdays coming up the following week, which again, we're going to acknowledge right now because we're not going to be here next Saturday. Kathy, you have a birthday coming up on April 24th is your birthday. I don't know if you knew that, but I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge it. And since we're not going to be here next Saturday, I would have missed pointing it out, and I didn't want to risk that. So happy birthday, Kathy, on the 12th. I'll be in touch with you on your birthday. Kathy is my sister. If you didn't know that, I think everybody here knows that. And then on that same date, Tamara Glavin, we had Aaron. We mentioned Aaron, and this is Aaron's wife, Tamara. Their birthdays are like a week apart, that type of thing. Actually, I think 10 days apart, but a week and a half apart. But Tamara celebrates a birthday on the 24th as well. And then Jonathan Siegel, a musician, singer, songwriter, composer, arranger, etc., who we have had on the show a couple of times, is celebrating a birthday on April 25th. And so happy birthday to Jonathan. Do you have a special day coming up this week or next that we missed here and you would like to make sure that we acknowledge your special day? Put it in the chat. And if you've got one coming up later in the month of April, or actually more likely now since we're covering the next couple of weeks, maybe you have one coming up in the month of May or the month of June or any other month this year, you can send us an email and say, hey, I've got a special day coming up in the month of May or the month of June or later on this year. Yeah, it is going to be that kind of show. Send us an email to cbwsteve@comcast.net. Carissa is here in the background watching me and just smiling. Carissa, it is going to be one of those days. That's the way it started out. We're just going to keep going with that, as we all know. All right. Again, we're testing all of our little scenes here today, and actually we're probably going to have to bypass a couple of them, but I want to tell you a little bit about our guest before he is here. I mentioned as we came on the air, as we actually finally did come on the air, and if you're joining us late, we had some technical difficulties with the live stream that put us here about 5 minutes or so late. So, but as I mentioned up front, there are some people who really are in so many ways are a great example of making a difference. It's something that we talk about on the show. It's about the importance of making a difference in our world. And I want to tell you a little bit about our guest. And you're going to hear from our conversation today the different ways that he made a difference, and the fact that through that, it wasn't all about perfection. It was about really sometimes reinventing himself and finding ways to step out into zones that were not necessarily his forte or his comfort. But with that, let me just introduce him. Michael Creedon is a retired ExxonMobil executive after a 30-year global career in operations, engineering, project management, and maintenance. He is also a retired U.S. Army colonel after 29 years of active, reserve, and National Guard service that included company and battalion level commands, as well as brigade and division leadership assignments. In 2007 2008, while working for ExxonMobil, Michael was called to active duty service to lead the U.S. Army Reserve Civil Affairs team attached to 191 Cavalry, or Task Force Sabre, in eastern Afghanistan. Later, in 2011-2012, he was again called to active duty service to command U.S. Army Reserve Civil Affairs forces in northern Afghanistan. During his active and reserve military career, Michael witnessed and experienced firsthand the struggles of veterans and their families trying to define their version of purpose, belonging, and well-being post-military. Michael currently serves on the board of directors of the Sabre 6 Foundation. He has degrees from West Point, Georgia Tech, and the U.S. Army War College, is a licensed professional engineer, and is currently a consultant in the energy field. Michael and his wife, Sherry, reside in Texas with their 3 sons, 1 dog, and 1 very bossy cat. So now, hopefully, here is my conversation with Michael Creedon. Well, Michael, let's try that again. Maybe. It's the way it's going to be today, Carissa. Well, Michael Creedon, welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
I got my coffee.
Excellent. So do I. I think we're set to jet here. You know, sharing your background and your bio, there's just so much there. And I think it's always interesting to begin by going to origins and just kind of ask, what was your upbringing like? And what were the factors as you grew up and through your education that kind of influenced and led to your varied and I think, diverse but very interesting career paths?
Yeah, 100%, nurture nature type of question there. And somewhat modest beginnings, middle class, solidly middle class out of North or Central New Jersey. Father was a research person with the government. Mother was mostly taking care of us at home, but also worked at a bank. Never had a want for anything. Uh, Older parents. Father was World War II vet. Mother grew up in the Depression. Absolutely, I think that shaped a lot of how I viewed the world. They were fiercely, independent. They were both self-made people, and got to where they got. So they instilled that on me to be self-made. And I took that throughout the rest of my life. It's a core value of I really don't want to owe anyone anything, within reason, of course, and want to make my own way. Don't want to be in debt. Stand on my own merits, and I that carried me through many years. I would say another aspect of my upbringing that was, humbling, not terribly an impressive physically, kid. Although I loved all sports and played all sports, I usually did them average at best. So rarely could win a fight necessarily. Rarely won a trophy. Just always good, but not great. And that's an interesting theme that carried itself throughout the rest of my life. I always said I was the 90 person. If there was a test, I'm going to score 90. If there's a ranking of 100 people, I'll be 90th, that type of thing.
So, we've already mentioned the sort of dual career path that to some degree, I hate to say it defines you, but to some degree it's part of who you are and what you've done, both in the engineering world as a civilian, but also in the military. How did those two happen in terms of just the timing and the overlap, and how did they intersect with each other in terms of what you saw as your skills and your interests?
Yeah. So went to United States Military Academy, graduated out of there, did A minus again. I was in the top 10%, but I wasn't in the top 5% type of thing. Went to the active duty. When I got into the active duty, I was given a set of circumstances that were almost, Steve, almost insurmountable in terms of how I was literally, figuratively set up for failure
Mm,
across the board. Um, Managed through the grace of God somehow to have a defining moment. I was able to shed all of that. And then I became, more than just the 90 person. I was probably the 97, 98 person. I share that because at the same time, I had to create a coping mechanism for this intense stress that I was going underneath. And back in the day, a good night at the pub was that coping mechanism. A little bit more acceptable back then than it is now. Where what you had that much and you drove home. Wow, that's what a person you are. That's great, as opposed to, oh, what an idiot you are now, right? The times have changed for sure, and thank God for that. Uh, and so, to your question, I had a defining moment. I was doing extremely well as a young lieutenant, about to become a captain, active duty, but I was creating a lifestyle that was not going to end well at all. It was a bravado, hard playing, hard working lifestyle that I could see 20 years down the road was going to lead me to places that I wasn't going to be happy with. And it was that moment at about the 3 or 4 year mark in the military that I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to become that. I could see the role models. I'm like, that's not what I want to do in 20 or 30 years. I don't want to be like that. And so I got out and reinvented myself. I remembered I was an engineer. I graduated as a civil engineer from West Point, but went into armor and didn't touch it. It was all about tanks and soldiers. Drew back on that, and I was a Georgia resident at the time, and threw my hat in the ring to go to Georgia Tech. And for whatever reason, they accepted me. And I studied construction management. I spent 1 year doing that. I was broke because I had left a full time job, and then I was a nobody and living off my paycheck. I'm sorry, living off my savings, which lasted exactly 4 months. Labor Day weekend, into the second quarter, I was broke. And I remember this, went into the Atlanta newspapers and looked at the want ads and became a waiter
mm,
and waited tables. And that's what I did to reinvent myself. Continued to study, managed to graduate, and literally went with the organization that was going to offer me the most amount of money for my resume, and that happened to have been at the time Exxon. And they saw my grades and they saw something in me, and they hired me. And so now I've transitioned out of the military career into the civilian career as an engineer, reinvented myself. And that, Steve, would have been just fine until 9/11 happened. And then it
yep,
wasn't fine. When 9/11 happened, it was, nope, I had an original calling. I somewhat turned my back on that. Country needs me. I have a skill set. And that's when I, in earnest, fought my way back into the military as a reservist. And then from 2004, 2005 onward, I had two careers at the same time: full
yep.
time Exxon and part time military.
Michael, if you can just talk for a little bit about your career with ExxonMobil, where you started, how that transitioned, how you rose in the ranks there, and how your career there, what that meant to you, and what you were able to contribute.
Started down in Baytown, Texas, as a marine terminal engineer, so somewhat a position that lended itself to civil engineering, and became an engineer at their docks. And I helped with problem solving, troubleshooting, the maintenance of, and the engineering of the marine facilities, whether those were loading arms or hoses or mooring points or dredging, just to keep the docks functioning. I had a reasonable amount of talent with that. I was offered the opportunity to go back up to New Jersey, where I was from, to go in the central engineering organization and do that across all of the Exxon marine facilities globally. Went up there. I got to tell you, I did horrible up there for the first 2 years because what they were really looking for was a deep technical engineer. And I was not that person. I mean, I was basically ex military and had reinvented myself in graduate school, but I wasn't that 7 year deep technical engineer. And so I struggled, and boy, did I struggle. I went well below the 90% mark on that one. But hung in there, and what I attributed to was a tenacity of no job was too small for me, and no inconvenience was too small for me. So, or too great for me, I should say. So, someone would walk in my office like, "Well, we need someone in Baton Rouge like tomorrow." Like, I'll go. Oh my goodness, the person who was supposed to go to Argentina can't. You need to be in a plane in 12 hours. The visa will meet you at the airport. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I'll do that. And so I was a 24/7 person, and there weren't a lot of us that did it, looked at the world that way. And even though I didn't have the skill set, Steve, because I would show up and at least was smart enough to know that I didn't know what I didn't know and would reach back with the senior engineers. I did very well with that role. And then I offered a pinnacle assignment to go overseas for a construction project in Thailand, and spent 2.5 years there. Did very well with them. And upon my return, I was made middle management, and that brings us up to about 2000, 2001.
So now post 9/11,
Yep.
you now have that calling to get reinvested in the military and the
Yep.
reserves.
Yeah. So there's a little middle story to that as I was waiting to get back to in the military, which took an inordinate amount of time, as the military can somewhat be with its bureaucracy. I became a volunteer firefighter. So I was able to at least serve my community for about 3 or 4 years while I was waiting to be called back to the reserves. Uh, so I signed on with the reserves, and I did I don't care what I do, I just need to do something to get back in. And because of that, I chose the branch that they most needed at the time in the reserves, which was civil affairs, which straddles the pure kinetic military world and the civilian world by which one occupies or is deployed to. And that was very different than what I had done, which was tanks, and that was straight up force on force kinetic. So I had to make that sort of adjustment. The reserves was an interesting place initially for me, and I didn't do very well. So I was a little bit on the back end of the first round of deployments. So pretty much everybody I was around had been to Iraq already in my unit it was in Pasadena, Texas, but ultimately becomes Ellington, just outside Houston. And so they had all been. And so you can imagine that there is a bit of a pecking order with those who have been, at least in the early phases, and those who had not been. And so, yeah, I had rank. I was a captain, but nobody cared about me or my opinion about anything, even if I was right or wrong. I had not gone. I was a slick sleeve, no combat patch, and that was a big deal. Even though that some of the people that went may or may not have done much with their time while they were there, that was irrelevant. They went, they had it, they served, they did good, and I had not. So I somewhat was not. I was not equal. I was not a peer until I got my first call up. Now, I've been married at this point for a while, and I can assure you that my bride of, at that point it was 12, 15 years, was not too happy about this going back into the military. She's a patriot, but we had two young kids and we had a third on the way. And the whole idea of Mike going back in the military to serve his country was not in her playbook. And that created a significant amount of family and marital stress in her mind. And I do not fault her for this at all. She thought I kind of turned my back on her. And to some degree, Steve, she's 100% right. I mean, my country called me. I answered that call. And it was not, family. So your family first. Well, some people get a phone call that says country first. Now, I rationalize it that, well, you get your country right, the family will be a-okay. And there's a significant amount of people in the past who have chosen country, and my family on my father's side for sure always chose country. So being third generation military, that was just do what your daddy did, and that's what I did. But it wasn't easy. So in between the okay, I'm not really an equal, and the marital issues that were going on, and the family issues, of which I created all of them, I own that. Fought my way through it. And when it came time for the set of orders to come down to deploy, which was in 2006 to either Iraq or Afghanistan, it was unknown, but we had given our basically our 6-month notice that we were going somewhere. It was that moment in time we had our Christopher had been born at that point. She went from okay, this is an issue to number one patriot. And she's never looked back. And never looked back. And that flipping of the switch gave me the permission, confidence, support, lots of words you could put in there to really focus on the mission at hand.
Mm.
And from there, I deployed with a small team. I deployed to one of the premier combat units in the United States Army with the 173rd Airborne. And upon arrival, learned the hard way how difficult their particular area of operations was. And through incredible people, they kept me alive the first 60 days and got me to a point where I could actually contribute. And then I not only contributed, but I did much, much more than that through the rest of that deployment.
I presume there were some times that stand out to you very nostalgically as having been very positive and something that you hold dear. Is there what would, and I think it's important for people to understand that part of military service as well. What can you share about that?
Yeah, there are two types of memories I have that I still smile at. The first one is, Steve, a cup of coffee. So, particularly out when we were on patrol or we were defending a piece of terrain, or when we were on the attack on a piece of terrain. We were mostly in Humvees and then would do dismounted. So we had the ability to have a little stove every once in a while and heat up some water and make some instant coffee. And making it through the night, because we would get up at 3 or 4 in the morning to have stand to, because that's when the bad guys would also be up. And if we were going to get hit, they were going to hit us at first light was one theory. So we were always up and waiting for that. And if we made it through that without incident, majority of the time we did, then the sun would rise. And then I earned a cup of coffee. And so I would usually go with, I was a captain. I was usually always out with another captain of the infantry, cavalry, I should say. And we would usually figure out a way to warm some water up and make some instant coffee and just spend about 10 minutes together. They were the quintessential vets. I was the newbie and just happy to be alive. So my coffee was victory, made it through another night, and their coffee was, well, yeah, it's just another day. But either way, either way, I'm nostalgic about that because those were always very, very good cups of coffee to see the light of day, to make it to the light of day. Um, I like that. The second memory was in preparation for going out of the wire and doing our convoy to go wherever we were going. You would usually get your vehicle ready, 30 to 60 minutes ahead of time. And that would mean packing, checking, getting the various electronic devices to get yourself up radios. You would do all your pre-combat checks, and there would usually be 4 or 5 vehicles around, and all the crews are doing the same thing. Someone might have some music on, and it was just your adrenaline was up, you were going, and you're amongst a bunch of people who were also going, and you were getting ready to do it. And I find as I get older, I have fond memories of that because you were on edge, but you were with a group of people that were also on edge. You were doing what you'd been trained to do. You were doing it extremely well. And just being at the top of your game. That was being at the top of our game to get ready to go out to do what we were commissioned to do. Was a cool thing.
Just curious a little bit about how your career came to its logical conclusion and that transition into retirement, and what transitioning into retirement after such active careers was like for you.
Yeah, it's funny how both of them, the easy button on why I left was financial. Um, there were certain conditions for both Exxon Mobil and the military, which financially made the most sense at that time to punch out. But Steve, that's the easy button. The reality button was I was tired for both sets of careers. I had kind of got to the point where I wasn't necessarily pleasant to be around. Some of the minutia was beginning to weigh on me. The soldiers and the employees were coming from a different generation that I did fine with, but they were different, and so the leadership styles that worked in the past weren't working as well in present day. I say that tongue in cheek. Mine still translated quite well across the generations, but others did not. And so I was cognizant of that. And so I was at a level where I could see I was getting tired and they weren't getting my best. Now, the funny thing about having spent 30 years or so in both professions, even your good is usually better than a lot of other people's best at that point because you just know how to get things done and you know how to kind of cut to the hearts of certain matters more efficiently than someone more junior. So outwardly there was no performance issues necessarily, but inwardly I was like, this is tiring. I'm starting to lose the zest for it. I think it's time to go. And coupled with a couple economic scenarios, it was time to go. It was time to reinvent myself again. Very similar to that, leaving active duty. I did not want to be that person. Um, 10 years later, who absolutely was disgruntled with all living things and still working, and that was the only thing I had to add to this world was, yep, I'm still working. I didn't. That wasn't enough for me at that time. So both of those scenarios led, or those scenarios led to exiting military. with my pension, because I had served overseas and could draw it earlier, I was going to make more by drawing the pension than I was to just continue to be in the reserves. So at some point, I kind of go, I do love God and country, but this is kind of silly. And that was, so it was time to go. And it was only like a year and a half earlier than I would have been asked to leave because of the mandatory age anyways, but I left. And then Exxon, it was one of those, um, uh, pension type of scenarios where you had a choice. You either went then or you waited 5 years because you were going to lose a lot of money in the middle. And I left, and those were the right decisions. They're still the right decisions.
Mhm. What was the transition into retirement, and what is retirement for you? How do you define that?
Uh, it was horrible, Steve. It was really, really hard. The first 6 months to a year, the first 3 or 4 months were awesome. And then that next year was extremely difficult. And people said it would be. So it wasn't like I wasn't prepared for this. People were like, ooh, you're going to be in for some big adjustments. And some people don't do real well with that. And I got to see exactly why some people don't do well with that. And so it wasn't the, oh, I'm on the golf course every day and just enjoying the fruits of what I had sowed for 30 years. I struggled. Um, and I actually I wrote down the 20 things that, or actually it's 19, but 19 things I learned in retirement from that experience. And some of the things people had told me up front, like here's one, and I think I shared with you one of our previous meetings. If you don't have a hobby, a passion by the time you're 40, it may not come to you at 60 when you retire. Like you're not going to suddenly wake up in the morning and go, I've always wanted to arrange flowers. I think I'm going to go all in on arranging flowers. I mean, you might,
Mhm.
God bless you if you do. I hope you do. But a lot of people don't have the ability to acquire a new hobby at an advanced age. Either the passion's not there, the zest's not there, or the skills aren't there, or the patience isn't there. So you need to kind of have those in place before you do that. If you think that's what you're going to do, and I didn't have a lot of those. If I look back, I had work, I had the army. Those were my two things, and of course my family. But work and army in terms of that, so both of those were taken away. All right. Well, you go, well, Mike, you got your family. Go all in on your family. Well, you know what? Your family did very well with the role that you had for many years. Now to go all in on the family, you can flick a switch, but they may or may not. Plus, there are different need levels. So I found that wasn't all in either. Another one for you, Steve. Like, I'm gonna travel the world. I'm gonna go and look. A lot of people do it, and awesome. What I found was travel was sweeter when there was a sacrifice or work before doing it. And so to go on a vacation was a reprieve from the 9 to 5 daily grind.
Mhm.
It was earned and it was sweet. I can go on vacation every day for the rest of my life right now, but there's a part of me that's like, yeah, but it's you haven't, yeah, you earned it 30 years ago, but you haven't earned it last week.
Mm.
It's the step ups are different, and at least for me, um, I can't be perpetually on vacation. It doesn't. I need some sort of work sacrifice in order to enjoy the reward. And so you say, and my wife tells me, like, you spent 30 years doing that. I go, yeah, but that's in the past. I need something more recent. So maybe that's a meism, but I struggled a little bit with that. So um, I found a lot of people in my situation, because they didn't know what else to do. They went back to work, right? They just said, that's it. I'm good in this field. I'm going back to work. And I always would say, well, I'm not going to be one of those people. Yeah, okay, Steve, I became one of those people. So I am good at my field, but it's now on my terms, right? So I do 1 week a month. The finances are relatively easy to do it, and I can make an incredible impact. And it's just enough to stay relevant, but not to the point of getting anywhere near where I was when I retired with the fatigue, the unhappiness, the stress, and all that. I can compartmentalize it and take it in small doses, and that work in quotes now gives me a more liberating feeling to enjoy the vacations that I'm involved in. I have found hobbies that I used to do as a kid, and that fits the less than 40 rule. And I'm finding passion and enjoyment with those. Now, some of them I have to do differently because of, you know, an advanced age. But I can still do many of them. And so I do enjoy that. I am finding my passions again for being back out on the water, whether that's rowing or hopefully surfing if I can get my flexibility up. I'm back into music, both listening and playing. I'm going to concerts again. These were all things I did as a kid and loved, but didn't do as a middle-aged person. And now I'm rediscovering, and that's working out well for me. So those are just a few of the things that I've learned. Um, I received some counsel from someone. Make a list of 100 things you want to do in retirement. You'll struggle to come up with 100. May take you a couple iterations. I did that. I've refined that list over the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm down to about 70. And I read them about once or twice a week. And although there's no method to the madness, I am slowly ticking them off on things that I want to get done. Some of them aren't like crazy. Like, all right, I want to see the pyramids. I do want to see the pyramids, and that is on the list. But it doesn't have to be that. Like one was, I want to cook a brisket from start to finish. I want to spend the 14 hours. I want to do a Texas brisket. I want to do it the right way. I did that. Check. So it's things like that that we all have if we spend a couple minutes to or over a couple sessions to kind of formulate our thoughts.
Yeah. One of the other things that I know that you currently do is giving back to the community in a variety of ways, including your involvement with an organization that's also dear to my heart, the Saber Six Foundation. And I wonder if you want to just maybe conclude this conversation a little bit by talking about the importance of involvement and beyond paid career situations. What do you see as the importance of finding those things that you can give back to?
I think that's huge. Saber Six is built around the unit that I deployed with, that first deployment, the ones where I still have those fond memories about getting ready for our combat patrols and the cups of coffee. So I wanted to give back. It also helps that my classmate and former squadron commander Chris Kalinda is the founding person for that charity, and so I am involved in that charity that tries to help the veterans of that task force. Is about 800 paratroopers and associated attachees like myself, really thrive in this world. Their view is, and I fully support it, is we want to keep people from ever approaching crisis, right? Veterans. There's lots of organizations out there that can help with crisis management and crisis intervention. And if you're waiting to really start the good work at that point, in their mind, that's too late. We want to keep people so that they don't have a negative trajectory. They only have a positive trajectory. in whatever small increments that person's life can absorb. And so I'm all in on that type of mission. So I've asked Chris if I could help. He brought me on. I became a board member. I'm helping with retreats for soldiers to reconnect with fellow soldiers and do some just out in nature contemplation time and see that there's different ways to get from A to B. Helping out with a scholarship fund for them to have a different passion, either educationally or vocationally, in their mid years and later, and really just trying to help with their programs to drive upward trajectory in these heroes.
Well, Michael Creedon, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for your involvement in a variety of things, for your career and your in retirement, your service to our community. And thank you for taking the time to join us and share your story in a way that I hope and I think quite honestly will inspire and motivate others.
I hope so. And thank you for the opportunity to share a few hard-earned stripes from life with your viewers. The best years are ahead for me, and I'm excited about them. And I hope the best years are ahead for your viewers as well.
Right on. All right. Thanks, Michael. All right. That was my conversation with Michael Creedon. And again, thanks to Michael both for I just think the insights that Michael provided were motivating and inspiring in so many different ways, from the standpoint of how he has reinvented himself multiple times, how he approaches that, and his transparency and talking about the fact that it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always the best way necessarily to deal with certain things. I think those are the stories that help us recognize how we ourselves can move forward and move in directions that will be positive and will make a difference. So thank you, Michael. I know we're running a little bit late. For those of you who joined us late today, we had a little bit of an issue going live at the beginning of the program and got started a few minutes late. As a result, even some of our setup in here has been a little bit weird, and we want to make sure that we are wrapping up effectively. But and I'm going to try to do that, and we're going to see what happens here, and talk a little bit about what's coming up in the next few weeks. I mentioned that we're not going to be here next week, and that's one of the times that we take a little bit of a hiatus from the show, and it's any more not typical because normally either Carissa or Chelan is available to step in as a host, and they do a fantastic job when they do that. However, we're making a little trip to Disneyland next week to take a couple of grandkids who we have owed this trip to for a while. For one of them, it's been 5 years, more than 5 years since we were planning this, and then COVID took that away for a little bit, and we've been working on kind of a reset, taking 2 grandkids, but we're also taking some kids with us, and so Carissa and Chelan are also going to be at Disneyland and not available next week to step in as host. So we're just taking a little break next week, and that's fine. Do want to let you know what's coming up in the next few weeks after that, however. On the 26th of April, when we come back, a lady by the name of Jackie Ross is going to be joining us. Jackie is a Los Angeles-based actor and YouTube reactor who has her degree in film and theater in acting. And she takes her experience and her background and her education and applies that to her reactions, but not in a way where she simply makes it a technical reaction. You really get her heartfelt reactions to movies and TV series that she didn't get to see when she was younger. So you're going to want to be here to meet Jackie and to kind of get a sense. You know how much we enjoy having entertainment-based professionals on here. So you're going to want to meet Jackie. And then the week after that, another person who's involved in the entertainment industry by the name of Roy Samuelson. He is an actor and voice actor, but his area of specialty is in doing descriptive audio for people who are blind or visually impaired. And we're going to meet Roy, and we're going to hear about that aspect of his career and why it is so important. That's on May 3rd. And then on May 10th, we got yet another person involved in the entertainment industry here by the name of Elle Emery. Elle is an Australian. She is based in Melbourne, Australia, and she's going to be joining us to talk about her career both as a singer-songwriter and as a music producer. And that's going to be an absolutely amazing conversation on May 10th. And then May 17th, our friend and past guest Lisa Steele is going to be back talking to us again. Lisa always brings amazing insights about topics that are, I think, good for putting us in a place of reality check on certain aspects of life. So you're going to want to be here for that. What are the topics you would like to discuss? Who are the guests you'd like to see on Coffee Breaks with Steve? You can send us your ideas. You can make introductions if you know somebody you think should be on as a guest. But email us at cbwsteve@comcast.net to share your ideas. We are thrilled to get those ideas so many times. So many of the people who have been and continue to be, including some of the people who are set to come on for the next few weeks, quite literally, are people who were recommended to us, and in some cases the introductions made by others who said, this is a person you should have on the show. We'll talk a little bit more about that with each of the guests when they're here. Share your ideas with us. 6 years. We celebrated our anniversary this last week. 6 years on the air, 268 episodes as of today. 137 of those episodes have included guests that we have had a conversation with. 92 individuals have been willing to join us on Coffee Breaks with Steve. Thank you to all of those people, and thank you to you for continuing to be here. Do not forget that we also have a YouTube channel, Coffee Breaks with Steve YouTube channel. It's easy to find. And if you are not already a subscriber there, we would invite you and plead with you a little bit to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because that helps us get Coffee Breaks with Steve, conversations like this one with Michael Creedon, in front of a broader audience who can be inspired and motivated by this. So we hope that you will do that, and hope that you will continue to be one of the people who spreads the word about this show and about the things that we're doing. I want to say one more time a huge, huge thank you to Michael for being here and for sharing his story in our conversation, also being here to be able to make his comments and respond to questions and comments that you put up there during our show today. Once again, thank you for your patience as we got a little bit of a late start, so we're running a little bit late, but I think it's worthwhile. So I hope that you will have an amazing rest of your day. And I hope that things like the stories that Michael shared with us today will be a motivator and an inspiration. There are so many things around us that we can touch, that we can influence. There are people around us who we can be the hands and feet for sometimes. So please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you in a couple of weeks on Coffee Breaks with Steve.